On April 9, 2025, President Trump made an explosive announcement that has sent shockwaves through global markets. The United States, he declared, would raise tariffs on imports from China to over 100%, a move that could drastically change the dynamics of global trade. This decision comes after a key deadline, which Trump had set for China to remove its retaliatory tariffs on American goods, passed without any significant action. This escalation in the U.S. China trade war has the potential to reverberate through economies around the world, but for China, the impact could be especially devastating. In this video, we'll explore the potential consequences of this tariff escalation, with a particular focus on the toll it could take on China, its economy, and its people. How will China respond to these new tariffs? What will be the long-term effects on its manufacturing sector, its workers, and its international standing? And, perhaps most importantly, how much further can this trade war escalate before it becomes unmanageable for both sides? The U.S. China trade war didn't start with President Trump's tariffs, but rather has been years in the making. Tensions between the two countries over trade have been simmering for decades. U.S. officials have long accused China of engaging in unfair trade practices, such as currency manipulation, intellectual property theft, and forced technology transfers. The trade imbalance, with China exporting far more to the U.S. than the other way around, has been a point of contention for years. Trump, when he took office in 2017, promised to address this imbalance and bring jobs back to America by pressuring China to reform its trade policies. His administration began by imposing tariffs on billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods. These tariffs were meant to penalize China for what Trump saw as a pattern of economic exploitation that hurt American workers. In response, China retaliated with tariffs of its own on U.S. goods. What began as a series of isolated tariffs quickly escalated into a full-blown trade war, with both countries continuously increasing the stakes. The announcement of tariffs over 100% marks the latest phase in this ongoing battle, and it raises the question: how much further can the U.S. and China go before the consequences become unbearable for both sides? The move to increase tariffs on Chinese goods to over 100% is, without a doubt, the most dramatic escalation in the trade war so far. President Trump's reasoning for this new round of tariffs is simple. He wants China to back down from its retaliatory tariffs on U.S. products. The deadline that he set for China to act has come and gone without any significant response from Beijing, prompting Trump to follow through with his threat to impose higher tariffs. This will not only affect the price of goods imported from China, but could also lead to significant shifts in global supply chains, particularly as American consumers are forced to pay more for Chinese-made products. But what does this mean for China specifically? The impact on China could be severe, and the consequences may be felt for years to come. With U.S. tariffs climbing to over 100%, Chinese manufacturers will face an unprecedented level of pressure. Prices for Chinese exports to the U.S. will rise dramatically, potentially pricing them out of the market. For many manufacturers in China, this could be the final blow. The U.S. is one of China's largest export markets, and a sudden drop in demand for Chinese products could have devastating consequences for the country's manufacturing sector, which has long been the backbone of its economic growth. China's manufacturing sector has been one of the key engines driving its economic rise over the past few decades. The country's ability to produce a vast array of goods at a low cost has made it the world's factory, exporting everything from electronics to clothing to machinery. The United States has been one of China's largest trading partners, and for years, American consumers have relied on cheap Chinese imports for everything from smartphones to household items. But with the new tariff increases, that dynamic is about to change. If China's goods are suddenly subjected to tariffs of over 100%, the price of those products in the U.S. will increase dramatically. For American consumers, this means paying higher prices for everyday items. But for Chinese manufacturers, the situation is far worse. Many of these manufacturers will be unable to absorb the increased costs, and as a result, they will face a dramatic decline in demand for their products. Factories may be forced to shut down, workers may be laid off, and entire supply chains may unravel. For a country like China, which has become so reliant on manufacturing and exports, this shift could be catastrophic. Entire cities that have built their economies around production for export could see mass unemployment and economic decline. While China has made efforts in recent years to transition to a more consumption-driven economy, the country's dependence on its manufacturing sector remains deeply ingrained. The tariffs imposed by the U.S. could undermine this fragile transition and send the Chinese economy into a tailspin. While the broader economic effects of the trade war will be felt across China, the human cost will be particularly acute for ordinary workers. In cities like Shenzhen, where much of China's manufacturing takes place, workers are already facing the brunt of the economic slowdown caused by the tariffs. Many of these workers are employed in factories that produce goods for export, and as demand for these goods plummets, their jobs are at risk. In China, where unemployment rates can be politically sensitive, job losses are a significant concern. The government has long used job creation as a key pillar of its legitimacy. If millions of workers lose their jobs due to the collapse of the manufacturing sector, it could lead to widespread social unrest. The Chinese Communist Party, which has tightly controlled the country's economy and political system, could find itself facing a crisis of confidence among the population. For workers in lower income brackets, the consequences could be even more severe. These individuals often work in the most labor-intensive sectors of the economy, such as textiles, electronics assembly, and agriculture. The tariffs could decimate these industries, leaving workers with few options for employment. The government has already indicated that it will take measures to mitigate the social impact of these changes, but there's no denying that the human cost of the trade war could be enormous. Beyond the immediate economic effects, the tariffs could also have a lasting impact on China's global standing. For years, China has prided itself on being a rising superpower, using its economic might to assert itself on the world stage. The Belt and Road Initiative, for example, has sought to expand China's influence by financing infrastructure projects across the developing world. But if China's economy suffers a major setback due to the tariffs, its global ambitions could be called into question. China has long positioned itself as a champion of free trade, even as it faces criticism for its own trade practices. The country's leadership has been eager to counterbalance the influence of the U.S. in global economic governance, particularly through institutions like the World Trade Organization and the International Monetary Fund. But if China's economy falters in the wake of these tariffs, its credibility as a global economic leader could be undermined. Countries that have relied on China for trade and investment may begin to look elsewhere for their economic partnerships, and China's ability to shape the global economic agenda could be diminished. As the trade war intensifies, China faces a difficult question. Can it recover from the economic damage inflicted by these tariffs? In the short term, it's likely that the Chinese government will take steps to shield the economy from the worst effects of the trade war. This could include further devaluing the yuan, increasing state investment in key industries, and offering subsidies to struggling manufacturers. However, these measures may not be enough to fully offset the impact of the tariffs, especially if the U.S. continues to escalate its actions. In the longer term, China will need to find a way to shift away from its dependence on manufacturing and exports. The government has already been pushing for a transition to a more consumer-driven economy, but this process is complicated and will take time. Moreover, if China's international reputation takes a hit, foreign investment, which has been a key driver of its growth, could dry up, further exacerbating the challenges facing the country. At the same time, China may be forced to reconsider its approach to the U.S. trade relationship. The country has already shown a willingness to engage in high-stakes negotiations, and it's possible that the Chinese government could seek to strike a deal with the U.S. in order to avoid further escalation. However, given the nationalist sentiments that have been stoked by the trade war, making concessions to the U.S. could be politically difficult for China's leadership. While the U.S. and China may be the primary players in this conflict, the global economy will also bear the brunt of the consequences. The trade war has already caused disruptions to global supply chains, leading to price increases and shortages of key goods in many countries. If the situation continues to escalate, the impact on global trade could be devastating. For China, the consequences will be particularly severe. The country has long relied on its position as the world's factory, and losing access to the U.S. market would deal a significant blow to its economic model. But other countries may also suffer, particularly those that depend on trade with China or that are caught in the crossfire of the U.S. China conflict. The longer the trade war drags on, the more damage it will do, not just to China, but to the global economy as a whole. Economists have warned that a prolonged trade war could tip the world into a recession, particularly if consumer confidence begins to falter and businesses delay investment decisions due to uncertainty. The decision by the United States to raise tariffs on Chinese imports to over 100% marks a turning point in the trade war between the world's two largest economies. While the impact will be felt on both sides, China may face the most significant and long-lasting consequences. Its manufacturing sector, workers, and global reputation are all at risk as it scrambles to respond to this latest escalation. For the U.S., the strategy may yield some short-term leverage, but the broader effects of a fractured global trade system will be difficult to contain. The road ahead is uncertain, and both countries face difficult choices. But one thing is clear: the stakes have never been higher, and the cost of continued escalation may be more than either side is willing or able to bear. Thanks for watching. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. This is History and Curiosities, where we dig deep into the stories shaping our world.